His breath was uneven. We stood close, too close, in the dim corridor just behind the laundry room, where the air smelled like detergent and rusted pipes. The building was quiet, humming like it was holding its breath with us. His eyes searched mine, not hungrily, not with desire, but like he was trying to find the exact moment where all of this had begun. I wasn't supposed to be here. We weren't supposed to be like this. And yet, here we were. Inches apart. Words trapped in our throats. The world outside felt paused, as if it was waiting for us to make a decision we couldn't take back. He leaned in. I didn't move. And just as something between us started to shift, a loud thud echoed from above. The moment shattered. We stepped back like strangers. My heart didn't. Before I begin the story and tell you how everything really happened, answer this question. Do you agree that everyone deserves a second chance after cheating? It started on a Wednesday. Cold for Portland, though not unusual. The kind of cold that settles into your sleeves and reminds you just how thin your coat is. I was late for my shift at the coffee shop, not because I overslept, but because I stood too long staring at my bank app, watching a balance that didn't know how to count anymore. Rent was due 3 weeks ago. My cupboards echoed when I opened them. And I was already behind on utilities. My shoes slapped wet pavement as I rushed toward work, dodging puddles and broken leaves. I didn't even notice the "closed for business" sign until I nearly slammed into the locked glass door. Inside, the place was dark. No hum of machines. No clatter of cups. One of the supervisors, Greg, came out from behind the counter. He didn't look at me. We sent an email last night, he said, his hands stuffed deep into his hoodie. Corporate's pulling out of this location. Effective immediately. I stared at him. So, what does that mean for us? He finally met my eyes, but they were already apologizing. We're all let go. No warning. No severance. Just empty hours stretching in every direction. I walked home because the bus felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Each step echoed the same thought, I'm screwed. Back in my apartment, the air was cold. I hadn't dared to turn the heat on in 2 days. I pulled on a second sweater and sat at the tiny kitchen table, scanning job boards on my old laptop. Every position either required a degree I didn't have or experience I couldn't fake. I sent out 5 resumes anyway, knowing they'd likely disappear into silence. Around 5 p.m., he called. You okay? He asked. I wanted to tell him the truth. I wanted to say, no, I'm not okay. I lost my job. I don't have rent. I need you. But I didn't. I'm fine, I said. We didn't talk long. He was on his way to meet friends for dinner and didn't want to be late. I almost asked him to stop by. I almost asked if he could help me, just until I got back on my feet. But I didn't want to sound desperate. I hung up first. The knock came the next morning. Sharp, precise. I knew it was the landlord even before I opened the door. He wasn't tall, but he stood like someone used to control. Wore jeans and a flannel like it was armor. Eyes like fogged glass. Rent's late, he said simply. I know, I replied, gripping the doorframe. I'm trying to sort things out. He nodded, but not sympathetically. More like someone checking off a box. You've got 5 days. I just lost my job. I'm not running a charity. I didn't argue. What was the point? The days that followed were a blur of rejection emails, cheap coffee, and growing dread. My boyfriend texted less. I stopped replying altogether. I couldn't stand the guilt. On the 3rd day, I saw the landlord again. He was fixing a mailbox in the front entrance. Any luck? He asked, not looking up. I shook my head. No. He paused, then stood, brushing metal shavings off his hands. There might be another way. I didn't answer. He didn't elaborate. That night, I heated a can of soup and stared at the peeling wallpaper. I thought about pawn shops. Blood plasma. I thought about calling my sister, but we hadn't spoken in years. The next morning, my boyfriend showed up. Out of nowhere. I forgot my charger here, he said, like nothing had happened. I handed it to him. He lingered in the doorway, watching me. You look tired. I am tired. You could have told me, he said, softer now. Told you what? That you lost your job. That you needed help. I laughed, not kindly. Would it have mattered? He didn't reply. Just shifted uncomfortably. I've got stuff going on, he said, stepping back. But I'll be around, okay? And then he was gone again. I didn't cry. I went downstairs. I found the landlord by the back door, fixing the hinges. It was late. The building was quiet. I stood there for too long, saying nothing. Finally, he looked at me. You hear about the other way? I nodded once. He didn't smile, didn't move closer, didn't try anything. Come by tomorrow. Same time, he said. Then turned back to his tools. That night, I didn't sleep. I cleaned instead. I folded clothes. I reorganized the bathroom. I rearranged the few cans in the cupboard. I waited for the sunrise like it might bring a solution I hadn't thought of yet. It didn't. When I knocked on his door, he was already waiting. The place was nothing like I expected. Clean. Sparse. Framed photos of old cars and baseball games. The kind of space that spoke of solitude, not secrets. He offered me tea. We didn't talk much. Mostly, we just sat there, awkwardly, like two people who didn't know what they were about to do. But it wasn't what I thought. Not exactly. He told me about his life. About his first divorce. About losing everything in 2008. About starting over with nothing but this building. He didn't touch me. He didn't ask for anything. I know this is strange, he said quietly, but sometimes, people just need a place to be still. I left after an hour. Confused. Not scared. Just unsure. The next morning, I found an envelope taped to my door. Inside was a receipt. Rent paid. No note. No message. Just that. I ran down the stairs, heart pounding. His apartment door was open. But he was gone. And so was his truck. And the shock hit me so hard I couldn't breathe, not because I was scared. But because part of me wanted to know why he did it. And what he'd want next. I didn't expect to see him again so soon. The day after I found the rent paid, I tried to focus on anything else, folding towels, wiping down the fridge, even rearranging the photos on my shelf. But my eyes kept drifting toward the door, my ears tuning to every sound in the hallway. By mid-afternoon, I gave in and walked to the corner store. The weather was damp, typical for Portland, and I moved slowly, unsure of whether I was running from the apartment or toward the possibility of seeing him again. The chime above the store door jingled as I stepped inside. I grabbed a can of soup, a loaf of discounted bread, and a single apple. I was about to head for the register when I saw him. He stood at the self-checkout with a six-pack of root beer and a box of nails. Same flannel, same calm posture. He hadn't noticed me yet. I hesitated, then stepped into view. He turned. Nodded. Didn't expect to see you here, I said, regretting the awkwardness the moment the words left me. "Small city," he replied. "You holding up?" I shrugged, then held up the soup like a trophy. "Doing what I can." He tapped his card and waited for the receipt. "You hungry?" I blinked. "You mean now?" "There's a diner down the block." I was heading that way anyway. And just like that, we walked together. The Black Bear Diner was quiet. An old Elvis tune hummed from the ceiling speakers. The walls were lined with black and white photos of Oregon's logging history. A waitress in her 50s gave him a nod and poured 2 coffees without asking. We didn't talk much at first. He stirred his drink slowly, watching the cream spiral. I focused on the wood grain in the table. Finally, he said, "You didn't need to say yes the other night." I looked up. I didn't. He met my gaze. "That's why I didn't ask again." A long silence followed. I wasn't sure if it was uncomfortable or honest. "You helped me," I said. "No one else did. I didn't do it to trap you." "I know." He leaned back, sipping quietly. "I'm not good at rescuing people. I just don't like watching someone sink when I can throw them a rope." I nodded. It was the first thing all week that didn't sound rehearsed or transactional. As we left the diner, rain began to fall, not heavy, just a soft mist. He walked me back to the apartment, both of us silent under the thin awning outside the door. "Can I ask you something?" I said. He nodded. "Why did you help me?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "Because no one helped me when I needed it." That answer stayed with me. The following day passed in a strange rhythm. I half expected a knock on the door or another envelope. But nothing came. So I did something reckless. I went to him. I knocked on his door just after 8 p.m. My hand was shaking, but I didn't try to hide it. He opened the door slowly, surprised but not startled. "Hey." "Hey," I said. "Can I come in?" He stepped aside without a word. The apartment looked exactly as it had the first time, warm, quiet, framed by modesty. I sat down on the same couch. He made tea again, same kind. Mint. "I don't know what this is," I admitted. "I just didn't want to be alone tonight." He sat across from me, a quiet understanding between us. The minutes ticked by slowly. At some point, I started talking about the job, the feeling of drowning, the silence that follows after someone you love stops showing up. He listened. That was all. And when my voice cracked, he didn't reach for me or move closer. He just stayed. We talked until midnight, the conversation shifting from pain to old memories. He told me about his first truck. I told him about my dad's old record player and how it always skipped on Billy Joel. Then, somewhere between laughter and silence, we looked at each other. And we kissed. I left that night with 1,000 questions in my chest, none of which I could answer. The next day, my friend Karen called and insisted I meet her for lunch. I agreed, partly because I needed to talk to someone normal, someone who didn't exist in this blurry new version of my life. We met at a Denny's near the freeway. Karen was already seated, waving me down with her bright orange nails and loud voice. "You look different," she said the second I sat down. "Different how?" "Like you slept. Or got laid. Or robbed a bank. I can't tell which." I laughed, maybe too hard. "Definitely not the last one." She raised an eyebrow but didn't press. "Listen," she said between bites of salad, "I know you and your guy were having a rough patch. But you know he stopped by my place last night?" I froze. "He did?" "He wanted to know if I'd seen you. Said you weren't answering." He looked off. Like anxious off. I didn't know what to say. He's still trying, she added. That has to mean something, right? I didn't answer. Because I wasn't sure it meant what it used to. When I got home, there was a bag on my doorstep. No note. Just a grocery bag with apples, peanut butter, and a loaf of fresh sourdough. It was his way of saying he hadn't forgotten. And that somehow made it harder. That night, I stood in the kitchen eating an apple straight from the bag, staring at the empty wall. I felt like I was suspended between two stories, not sure which one was mine anymore. And then came the knock. I opened the door and found my boyfriend, my actual boyfriend, standing there with a suitcase. He looked exhausted. Messy. I've been thinking, he said. We can't keep doing this. So I made a decision. I blinked. What kind of decision? He pulled out a small box from his coat pocket. A set of keys. These are for a place in Bend. Friend of mine's renting it out. I already put the first month down. You and we can move there. Start over. Together. My hands stayed at my sides. My brain screamed. I couldn't even speak. And I got you a job, he added. Receptionist gig. Nothing huge, but it's a start. Clean break. He smiled like he expected me to jump into his arms. I stood there, frozen. Because I hadn't sent my resume anywhere. And someone else had just paid my rent. And nothing made sense anymore. He held out the keys like it was a gift, like this was supposed to fix everything. I didn't take them. We stood there in the dim hallway, me clutching the edge of the door, him with his duffel bag still resting against his leg. The longer I said nothing, the more his hopeful smile cracked. And still, I didn't know what to say. I just thought, he finally muttered, you'd be happy. I didn't ask for this, I replied, voice flat. His eyes shifted. So what, you're staying here now? You and the landlord are what, friends? I didn't answer. I didn't like the way he said that word. He looked past me, into the apartment, like expecting to catch a glimpse of something out of place. Something he could argue with. But there was nothing. Just my same couch, the same ugly lamp, the same silence between us. I stepped aside. You can come in. If you want. He hesitated, then dragged his bag in, setting it awkwardly by the door. He walked slowly around the room, taking it in like he'd never seen it before, like every little change might mean something. You threw out the picture. I did. He nodded once, like acknowledging a wound. We didn't talk much after that. He sat on the edge of the couch while I stood by the kitchen counter, unsure what to do with my hands. The tension hung heavy, a buzzing wire stretched between us. Eventually, he said he'd crash at his brother's and give me time to think. The door closed behind him with the finality of a slammed book. The next day, I went out early just to walk. I needed to breathe, to feel air that didn't carry the weight of past choices. I wandered toward Washington Park without thinking, drawn by the memory of when things felt simple. The leaves were turning amber and red, the air sharp but clean. I moved slowly past the trees, past joggers and dog walkers, until I reached the overlook. From there, the city looked smaller. Manageable. I sat on the bench for a long time, my fingers curled around a takeout coffee I hadn't planned to buy. That's when I heard his voice. You're a hard one to track down. I turned. It was him. The landlord. He didn't look surprised to see me. Just quietly amused. How'd you know I'd be here? I asked. I didn't. I hoped. I gestured to the empty space beside me. He sat. Neither of us spoke for a while. The breeze picked up, scattering dry leaves at our feet. Finally, I said, he came back. I figured. He brought keys. A job. A whole new start. He looked out at the horizon. That's a lot to put in one suitcase. I smiled despite myself. We didn't say what we were thinking, not then. Instead, we sat there until the sun lowered enough to turn the clouds gold. Walk with me, he asked. We moved through the park like we had all the time in the world, slow steps over crunching leaves. He told me about the time he tried to live in Arizona, how he missed rain more than anything. I told him about the Christmas I tried to bake gingerbread and almost set the apartment on fire. It wasn't flirting. It wasn't even close to it. It was comfort. Warmth. We ended up at the edge of the parking lot. I stopped, hands in pockets, not wanting to go yet. He looked at me, his voice quieter now. You're not trapped, you know. I know. You don't owe me anything. I know that too. Then, for a moment, we just stood there, still. And we kissed. The world didn't tilt. No thunderclap. Just a moment so quiet it echoed. I pulled away first. Not because I wanted to. But because I had to. I should go, I whispered. He nodded once, no pressure in his face. I'll see you. The walk home was different. Lighter and heavier all at once. When I got back to my apartment, the duffel bag was gone. But the keys to the new place were still on my counter. Left like a question. I didn't touch them. The next morning, I met Karen again. She insisted on dragging me to this pop-up farmer's market near Alberta Street. There were folding tables, music, kids with face paint, dogs in little jackets. Life. Real life. You're glowing, she said. Either you got laid or got a job. I rolled my eyes. It's possible to feel good without either, you know. Not in my world. We wandered from table to table, picking through jars of jam and candles. Then she got distracted by a man selling lavender soap, and I was left holding her bag and watching the crowd. That's when I saw him. Not the landlord. Him. My boyfriend. He was standing near the cider tent. With someone else. I froze. The woman was laughing. Holding his hand. Wearing my hoodie. They didn't see me. I didn't move. I just watched. Long enough to be sure it wasn't just a friendly conversation. Long enough to notice the familiarity in his posture. The way he leaned into her. Karen came up beside me, glanced in the same direction. She said nothing, but the way her hand touched mine told me everything. We left the market in silence. My heart thudded, but not out of pain. Out of clarity. Later that night, I walked to the back entrance of the building. I found him there, my landlord, working on the old garden lights with a toolbox beside him. I didn't say anything. He looked up, wiped his hands on a rag, and gave me a look that didn't ask questions. Hey. I need to get out of here, I said. He raised a brow. Tonight? I nodded. Where do you want to go? I didn't have an answer. But I knew I didn't want to be in that apartment anymore. He stood up, picked up the keys from his toolbox, and said, "Come on." We didn't go far. Just a few hours outside the city, toward the coast. The drive was quiet, filled with winding roads and low-hanging mist. He played an old playlist from a USB stick, a mix of John Prine and Fleetwood Mac. I didn't ask why he had it. I just listened. We arrived at a motel. Nothing fancy. Just a place with 2 floors and flickering neon signage. But it was enough. The woman at the counter knew him. Called him by name. Handed over a key without asking questions. The room was warm. Simple. Faint smell of salt water and lemon cleaner. He tossed his bag on the chair. I took off my coat and sat on the bed. He handed me a bottle of ginger ale from the vending machine, then sat beside me. Neither of us said a word. And we spent night together. When the morning came, fog covered everything outside the window. I got up first and opened the curtains slowly, expecting nothing more than quiet waves and empty sand. But outside the door, resting on the hood of his truck, was my boyfriend. Waiting. He leaned against the hood of the truck like he'd been there for hours, arms folded, jaw tight. The ocean mist curled around him, softening the lines on his face, but not the tension in his body. I didn't move. I just stood in the motel doorway, clutching the edge of the curtain, heart thudding. He saw me. Of course he did. We locked eyes, and something unreadable flickered in his expression. Not anger. Not betrayal. Just confusion, maybe. Or recognition. Behind me, I heard the floor creak. The landlord stepped closer, saw what I saw through the window, then turned away without a word and started packing his things. Calm, quiet, like someone used to disappearing. I stayed frozen for another second, then slipped on my coat and opened the door. "What are you doing here?" I asked, my voice lower than I expected. "You weren't answering," he said. "Then Karen said you left town. I figured I'd find out why." He looked past me, toward the motel room. "I don't need to explain," I said. "You don't," he replied. But he stayed standing there. We didn't raise voices. We didn't say anything cruel. We just stared at each other in a silence that said more than either of us wanted to admit. Then he stepped forward, handed me something. The keys to the place in Bend. "I'm not asking you to go," he said. "I just want you to know, it's still there." He turned, walked back to his car, and drove off without looking back. The landlord came out of the room a moment later, duffel over his shoulder. "You okay?" he asked. I didn't answer. We drove back in near silence. No radio. Just the rhythm of tires on wet pavement and the occasional click of the turn signal. The highway signs passed in a blur. My thoughts did too. Back in Portland, he pulled into the alley behind the building. I got out before the truck stopped moving fully. He didn't follow. I didn't expect him to. Inside, the apartment felt different. Not heavier, emptier. There was a bag on the floor. The one my boyfriend had left behind. Still packed. Still zipped. I didn't touch it. Instead, I went straight to the bathroom, turned on the faucet, and let the water run until the mirror fogged. The next few days blurred into each other. I didn't see either of them. I threw myself into job applications. Grocery store. Call center. Library. Anything. I walked to every place that said help wanted in the window. I left my number. Smiled too hard. Lied about experience. Waited. On the fourth day, a library downtown called. They needed someone to fill in temporarily while one of their staff was on medical leave. Nothing fancy. Part-time. Minimum wage. But real. I started the next morning. The library was quiet, like a pause between thoughts. Mostly older people during the day, retired couples looking for gardening books, a man who came in daily to read newspapers without checking anything out. The building had high ceilings, dusty corners, and an odd charm. Like a place forgotten by time. One afternoon, while shelving returns in the fiction aisle, I felt a presence behind me. "I heard you got a job," he said. I turned. The landlord. Jeans. Jacket. Same steady expression. "Yeah," I said. "Temporary." He nodded. "Still something." I didn't ask how he found out. I was starting to accept that he saw more than he let on. We sat outside on a bench during my break. He handed me a coffee from the shop across the street. Said nothing about what happened at the motel. Didn't bring up the guy. I didn't either. Instead, we talked about books. He admitted he hadn't read a novel in years. "I always thought I'd pick it up in retirement," he said. But then life kept extending the deadline. I laughed. "You should start with something short. No pressure." "Like what?" I thought for a moment. "Maybe of Mice and Men. It's got a lot of truth in very few pages." He made a note of it on his phone. We parted without plans. But the next day, he showed up again. Then the next. Never long. Just 15 minutes at most, sitting outside with coffee. Listening. Letting the quiet stretch without demanding to fill it. Somewhere in that stillness, I started feeling okay again. One Friday afternoon, as I walked out of the library to catch the bus, I noticed a small crowd outside a storefront on the corner. There were construction signs, new posters on the windows, and the scent of fresh paint in the air. I walked over. A banner read, "Coming soon, Rose and Rust Cafe." Through the glass, I could see someone moving inside. Lifting stools. Unpacking supplies. It was him. He looked up, saw me, and smiled just a little. Later that evening, he knocked on my door. I let him in. He handed me a folder. Inside was a list of items for the cafe. Vendors. Menus. Possible logos. "I'm opening next month," he said. Figured I could use someone with a better taste in music. And maybe someone to make sure I don't decorate the place like a garage. "You want me to help?" "I want you to be part of it." It wasn't a question. I said yes. We started meeting every other evening. Working out designs, testing coffee blends, picking furniture. He let me choose the name. I picked Rose and Rust because it sounded like something that used to be broken but still had value. He liked that. Things moved quickly. There wasn't much time to overthink. Until the morning I found the envelope under my door. It was from the city. A property violation. Confused, I took it straight to him. He opened it, scanned the contents, and froze. "What is it?" I asked. He handed it to me. It was a formal notice, a claim of illegal zoning. The kind that could halt business permits. The kind that meant months of red tape and back payments. But the complaint, it had a name attached. My boyfriend's name. Filed 2 days ago. And just like that, I realized he hadn't walked away. He was still here. Still watching. And now, he was interfering. I stared at his name on the complaint form like it didn't make sense. Like maybe there was someone else out there with the same first and last name, same address, same signature. But no, it was him. The same man who'd offered me a new city, a job, a way out. The same man I thought had finally let go. The landlord didn't say anything. He stood perfectly still, one hand on the folder, the other hanging loose by his side. The air between us felt like it had changed temperature, thicker somehow, charged. I finally asked, why would he do this? He didn't answer right away. Just turned and walked back to the cafe. I followed him through the unfinished entryway, stepping carefully over plastic sheeting and unopened crates. He dropped the folder on the makeshift counter, then leaned on it with both hands. "This slows everything down," he said. "Maybe kills it." He knew what this would do. That's why he did it. We didn't say more. There wasn't anything else to say. I spent the next few hours helping move boxes, but my mind wasn't in it. Every corner of that space held promise, a clean start, something built from scratch. Now all I saw were risks. That night, I sat in my apartment with the envelope on the table, unopened again, like maybe it would say something different if I waited long enough. The next morning, I woke up before the alarm. Made coffee, poured it, didn't drink it. Instead, I walked straight to the library, even though it wasn't my shift. I needed the quiet. I needed something familiar, something that hadn't changed. Miss Crane, the head librarian, gave me a curious look when I arrived but didn't ask questions. She just handed me a clipboard and pointed to a stack of new returns. As I shelved them, my thoughts kept circling back to him. Not the landlord. Him. The one who couldn't let go. The one who said he wanted a future, and when I didn't choose him, decided if he couldn't have me, neither could anyone else. I didn't understand what he thought this would fix. Did he believe I'd come running back once everything I was building collapsed? Or did he just want to remind me that he could still reach me, even now? At lunch, I stepped outside and found the landlord waiting across the street. He didn't wave or smile. Just stood by his truck, watching. I crossed over and got in without a word. He drove us to a parking lot near the Willamette waterfront, then killed the engine. "I have an idea," he said. "But it's not simple." I waited. "I still know someone at the city permit office. We did a roof job for them a while back. He might be able to push this complaint into backlog hell." I looked at him. "You're calling in favors?" He shrugged. "I'm protecting what we built." We drove to the city office in silence. The building was cold and overly lit, all linoleum and lines. We waited nearly an hour before his contact came out, a man in his 60s, slightly hunched, with tired eyes and a coffee stain on his shirt. They shook hands like old colleagues. No smiles, just mutual understanding. I sat on a bench across the lobby while they disappeared into an office down the hall. When they came back out 20 minutes later, the landlord's face didn't give anything away. "Let's go," he said. Once outside, he finally spoke. "It's not gone. But it's buried." "For how long?" He looked straight ahead. "Long enough." We didn't talk about it again. Over the next week, things shifted. The cafe came alive piece by piece. We installed light fixtures. Painted walls. Ordered second-hand furniture from a place in Beaverton. I created a playlist for the soft opening. Even named the drinks. He let me. Every day we worked side by side. No labels. No promises. Just motion. Quiet cooperation. Even comfort. Then one evening, after a full day of hauling supplies, I stepped out back to get air. The alley smelled of wet leaves and old brick. He followed a minute later. Handed me a bottle of soda. Sat down beside me on the steps. I asked, "Do you ever think this is all too much?" He took a long breath. "Sometimes. But I'd rather build something than run from it." The next morning, I arrived at the library to find Miss Crane in the entryway, holding a stack of forms. "Someone asked about you," she said, handing me a visitor log. I flipped to the bottom. His name. "He said he was an old friend," she added. Didn't seem happy. I thanked her and filed the form away. Later that night, after dinner, I stopped by the landlord's apartment. He was in the kitchen, cleaning out a toolbox. I need to get out of town for a day, I said. He looked up, surprised. Everything okay? I just need space. One day. He nodded. Take my truck. I blinked. Seriously? Keys are on the hook. The next morning, I drove out before sunrise. East, toward Hood River. The highway was empty, the sky still clinging to darkness. I didn't have a plan. Just a direction. By the time I arrived, the sun had broken through. I parked near the waterfront and walked along the rocky shore. The wind was sharp, biting through my sleeves. I sat by the edge of the river and let the silence wrap around me. But it didn't last. When I returned to the truck, there was a note on the windshield. 4 words. We need to talk. Now. No name. But I didn't need one. I got back into the truck. Started driving home. When I arrived, the cafe door was unlocked. I stepped inside. He was there. My ex. Standing in the middle of the room like he owned it. Hands in pockets. Calm. I didn't think you'd actually show, he said. I didn't come for you. You came because you know this doesn't feel right. I stared at him. What are you doing here? He looked around the room. I watched you build this with him. I watched you become someone else. I had to remind you who you were before all this. I stepped closer. You filed that complaint? I just slowed it down. Long enough for you to realize this is a mistake. My hands curled into fists, not from anger, but disbelief. You sabotaged everything, I said. And for what? Control? I gave you a way out. You didn't take it. He stepped forward. I stepped back. And that's when the landlord walked in. He froze. All 3 of us stood in the same room. No one moved. No one spoke. Until the landlord finally said, "You're standing in a place you tried to burn down." My ex didn't flinch. I came to finish what I started. And then, without warning, he pulled a lease agreement from his coat pocket. My name on the signature line. And his. He turned it around slowly. This place, he said. It's half mine. The room went still. My name was on that lease. His signature, too. Black ink. Perfectly printed. I stared at the paper like it might vanish if I didn't blink. The landlord's jaw was tight. His eyes didn't leave my ex. He didn't shout. Didn't even move. I found my voice first. You forged this. No, my ex said, calm, steady. You signed it. You just didn't read the fine print. That night I handed you the keys to the place in Bend. You signed an agreement. I told you it was a rental authorization. It wasn't. It was a partnership clause. If you ever opened a business while still registered at that address, I'd retain partial legal interest in it. You were still using my address when you submitted the cafe paperwork, weren't you? I couldn't breathe. Couldn't even remember that moment clearly. There had been so many papers. So many things I hadn't read. He stepped forward and laid the document gently on the countertop. You thought you walked away, he said. But I was still in it. Just further back. He didn't look smug. He didn't gloat. That's what made it worse. He meant it. He believed it. I want out, I said. Now. I don't think you understand, he replied. I'm not here to stop you. I'm here because this place means something to you. And that means it matters to me. The landlord finally spoke. You're not welcome here. I don't care what paper you bring. You lied. You manipulated. No, my ex said. I used what was already there. She just didn't see it. He looked at me again. But now you do. Then he turned and left. No further argument. No fight. Just the sound of the door clicking shut behind him. The silence he left behind was deafening. I stayed frozen for what felt like minutes. The landlord paced once, picked up the document, scanned it quickly, then set it back down. We need a lawyer, he said. I don't have money for that. I'll cover it. No. You won't. He looked at me, eyebrows raised slightly. I'll figure it out, I said. This is my mess. He didn't fight me on that. Just nodded and stepped out, leaving me alone in the half-finished cafe, the smell of fresh wood still lingering in the air. That night I went back to the apartment, pulled out every file, every envelope, every document I'd signed since losing my job. There it was, buried between insurance papers and forwarded mail. A contract I hadn't read. My signature right below his. I dropped it onto the floor like it might burn. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table and Googled free legal advice in Portland. There were some non-profit options. Community offices. A walk-in clinic downtown. I called, waited on hold, finally booked a 15-minute consultation for the following day. That same afternoon, I stopped by the library on my lunch break, needing the rhythm, the quiet. Miss Crane asked if I could cover an evening shift. I said yes without thinking. The cafe sat untouched for 2 days. I couldn't walk back in yet. Not until I had a plan. On the third morning, the landlord came by the apartment. No warning. Just a knock and his face behind the peephole. Coffee, he asked. I nodded. We walked down to the corner cafe, the one we'd passed 100 times but never gone into. Sat near the window. Plastic seats, cheap mugs, good smell. I talked to someone, he said. An accountant I know. She says it's real. Binding. But there might be ways to push him out. If we prove the signature was gathered without informed consent. I don't want to fight him, I said. You're just going to give him half? No, I said. But I don't want to fight on his terms. That's what he wants. He didn't reply. Just stared at his cup. Let me handle it, I said. Why are you still protecting him? I'm not, I said. I'm protecting this. And you. He looked at me. He's going to keep showing up. I know. We finished our coffee. Left separate. That afternoon, I went to my consultation. A small brick building near downtown, the kind that looks like it's always half closed. Inside, a tired woman with cropped silver hair sat behind a glass partition. I gave her my paperwork, explained the situation as simply as I could. She read for a long time. Then said, he used a residency clause. It's shady, but technically legal. So what can I do? If you can prove intent to deceive, you can file for revocation. But you'll need a witness. Someone who heard him misrepresent what the document was. I thought of Karen. I thanked her. Walked out. Called Karen. She picked up on the third ring. I need a favor, I said. The next evening, she met me at the cafe. Looked around like seeing it for the first time. Then she leaned in. I remember that night, she said. He was bragging. Said you signed something big. Said you didn't even ask what it was. That's enough. I'll write it down, she said. Swear it, sign it, whatever you need. I hugged her. She didn't hug back right away, but when she did, it was solid. That night, I walked to the landlord's apartment. Knocked twice. He opened, surprised. "I'm filing the revocation tomorrow," I said. "I have a witness." He nodded. "You sure you want this fight?" "I'm sure I don't want to run." He stepped aside, let me in. We didn't talk much. Just sat in silence, old music playing in the background. We were almost comfortable again. Until the knock at the door. He looked at me. Then at the door. Opened it. And standing there wasn't my ex. It was a woman. Older. Well-dressed. Holding a small envelope in her hand. "I'm sorry," she said, eyes moving from him to me. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I didn't know where else to go." He froze. "Who are you?" I asked. She looked straight at me. "I'm his ex-wife." She stood in the doorway like she had every right to be there. Her voice didn't shake, her eyes didn't dart. She wasn't looking for a scene, she came for something real. And she wasn't just anyone. She was his ex-wife. And she knew my name before I ever said it. I didn't move. I didn't step forward or backward. I just watched as he slowly stepped aside and let her in. She walked in like she knew the layout. Her fingers brushed the edge of the table like muscle memory, and for a split second, I realized this used to be her home, too. He closed the door gently. Then he looked at me. There was something unreadable in his face, regret, maybe. But not guilt. She turned to him and said quietly, "I wouldn't have come if it wasn't important." He nodded once. "I believe you." I stood there, feeling like an extra in a play where I no longer understood the script. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small envelope, and set it on the counter. "This isn't a trick. I'm not here to start anything. But you need to read it." He didn't open it. He just stared at it. Then she turned to me. "You're the one he cares about now. I'm not here to disrupt that. But some things, they need to be said out loud. So he doesn't keep carrying them in silence." No one responded. She gave us both a tired smile, then walked back to the door. As she opened it, she paused and added, "Don't let him make the same mistake twice." The door clicked shut behind her. For a moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the low hum of the refrigerator in the corner. He picked up the envelope and turned it over in his hands, but didn't open it. Instead, he looked at me and said, "She's not wrong. I've been carrying things. You want to tell me what's in there?" "No," he said. "I want to show you." He walked into the back room, one I'd never seen, one he never used, and returned with a large plastic container. Inside were photo albums, faded documents, an old wooden box with a brass latch. He set it all on the table, then opened the top album. I sat across from him as he flipped pages. The first few were what you'd expect, wedding photos, trips, birthdays. A life. His life. But then came a picture I didn't expect. A woman in a hospital bed. Pale, smiling weakly. Him beside her, holding her hand. "My sister," he said. "The one no one knows about." He explained it slowly, carefully. She'd been sick for years. The kind of illness that creeps in and stays. His marriage had fallen apart in the middle of it all, not because of betrayal, but because of exhaustion. He'd spent years caring for his sister, financially and emotionally, while his wife slowly detached. Not because she was cruel, but because she couldn't live in the shadow of someone else's pain. "She left quietly," he said. "I let her. I didn't fight. I thought it made me noble at the time." He closed the album. She came today because I never told anyone the full story. And because she's the only one who knows what it cost me. I nodded. Not out of understanding, because I didn't. Not fully. But I respected the honesty. The weight of it. We didn't say much else that night. He packed the photos back into the box. I walked home without asking him to come with me. It didn't feel like distance. It felt like breathing room. The next morning, I opened the cafe early. Alone. I wiped counters, rearranged tables, added new plants to the windowsills. I put on music low in the background. Everything felt like forward motion again. Then I saw him. My ex. Not inside. Across the street. Standing beside his car. Watching. I didn't flinch. I didn't go outside. He didn't come in. By the time I looked again, he was gone. That same afternoon, a woman came into the cafe, a stranger in her late 40s, coat wet from rain, hair tucked under a scarf. She ordered coffee, then stood quietly by the window. After a few minutes, she came to the counter and said, "Is your name on the lease here?" I blinked. "Excuse me?" "I'm a notary," she said. I was asked to confirm a signature. A few months back. For someone with your name. I thought you should know. She slid a card across the counter. I probably shouldn't be saying this, she added. But something about it didn't sit right with me. The guy didn't even let you look at the last page. She left before I could ask another question. I turned the card over in my hand. Her name. A number. A date. I called Karen that evening. "We have enough now," I said. "Between you and the notary, we can file. This thing he did, this fake partnership, it ends." She didn't hesitate. "Then let's kill it." We met at her place and filled out the paperwork. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't fast. But it was solid. I added the notary's info, attached a sworn statement, and made copies. By the end of the night, everything was ready. I dropped it off at the city office the next morning. One stamped envelope. One long exhale. When I returned to the cafe, he was already there. The landlord. Moving tables. Unpacking new dishes. He didn't ask what happened. He just handed me a box and said, "New mugs." We worked side by side all afternoon, no tension. No questions. Just the steady rhythm of rebuilding. Then, at closing, just as I was about to turn off the lights, I heard footsteps in the back hall. I turned, expecting him. But it wasn't him. It was her. His ex-wife. Again. Only this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, carrying a leather satchel and wearing a calm, neutral expression, was a man in a gray suit. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'm sorry. I wasn't honest with you before." I froze. She stepped forward and added, "I didn't just come to talk. I came to settle something that was never finished." Then she looked toward the cafe floor. "This building," she said. "It's not his." She opened her purse, pulled out a folded deed. "It's mine." My fingers went numb as she laid the deed on the counter. I didn't touch it. I couldn't. The landlord stood behind me, silent. His face didn't change, not at first. He just looked at the document like it had floated in from another life, his old one, the one he never talked about. The one she had clearly never left. The man with her opened his satchel and produced another document. He laid it beside the deed with the clinical precision of someone who'd done this before. "She never transferred the building," the man said, adjusting his glasses. "Divorce filings confirmed separation of assets, but the ownership title was never legally reassigned. Technically, by city records, she still holds full possession. I glanced at her. She didn't look triumphant. If anything, she looked sad. Like this wasn't how she wanted things to go either. But it was happening all the same. I didn't come to take anything, she said, softly. But this place, it's mine. And if it's going to be used again, if it's going to have life again, then I have a say in what that looks like. The landlord still hadn't moved. His arms were crossed, but not defensively. Just still. He stared at the deed, then at her. You waited 10 years, he finally said. I waited until I knew you were building something again, she replied. Until I knew you were finally alive. Her words sat like dust in the air. I felt like I was intruding on a conversation I had no right to witness. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Because this wasn't just about them. This was about everything I had helped build. Everything I had let myself believe in. He looked at me. I didn't know, he said. I believe you. Then he turned back to her. So what do you want? I want to be part of it, she said. The lawyer spoke again. The property is under her name. But she's not exercising an eviction. She's offering a shared use arrangement. Technically legal. Unorthodox, but legal. The landlord let out a slow breath and rubbed his jaw. And if I say no? Then it's hers, the lawyer replied. For a long time, no one spoke. The cafe was quiet. The only sound came from the rain that had begun outside, tapping lightly against the windows. Eventually, I stepped forward. What happens to me? I asked. She looked at me. For the first time, fully. I don't want you to leave, she said. That's not what this is. Then what is this? A second chance, she said. For all of us. I looked back at him. His eyes met mine for just a second. Then he nodded, like giving something up, not the building, but the story he thought he'd already closed. The next few days were chaos. Contracts were redrawn. Schedules rearranged. A new business plan was submitted, this time with 3 names instead of 2. I watched the city clerk's eyebrows rise as he read through it. But he stamped it all the same. Somehow, she didn't push herself into every corner of the project. She didn't take over. She just appeared. She brought in someone to refinish the wood on the back patio. She suggested we use real dishes instead of disposable ones. She ordered fresh paint for the front signage but let me choose the color. At first, it was unbearable. And then it was just strange. And then, little by little, it started to work. We became 3 people tied together not by affection, but by circumstance. And strangely, that made it cleaner. No one pretended. No one overshared. We just showed up. Every day. At the same time. For the same purpose. Then came the soft opening. It was a Thursday evening. The lights were warm, the floor finally finished, and the smell of new espresso floated through the air. Locals trickled in, curious neighbors, a few friends, even someone from the library. Karen showed up with flowers. Miss Crane left a card under the register. The landlord stood behind the counter with me, calmly handling the register as if he hadn't just gone through weeks of emotional whiplash. His ex-wife floated between tables, clearing cups, refilling water, asking people if they were comfortable. I stood back and watched it all. It felt surreal. Like I had stepped into someone else's idea and found that it fit me better than I expected. And just when I thought the night would end quietly, something happened. I was in the back, rearranging supplies near the storage shelf when I heard the bell above the cafe door chime. I didn't look up. Not until I heard a voice. Not my ex. A different one. Familiar. Too familiar. I turned, and there she was. The notary. The one who'd helped me file the complaint. She walked in slowly, eyes scanning the room, expression unreadable. And then she said, "I think we have a problem." I stepped out from behind the counter. What kind of problem? She pulled out her phone and handed it to me. Opened to a page on the city's public filings database. There, listed under a recently processed application, was a new business name. Rose and Rust Cafe. Filed under his name. My ex. No partners listed. Just him. Filed 2 weeks ago. And the listed address? Not the cafe. My apartment. He hadn't just forged one contract. He'd opened a second business in my name. Registered from my unit. Using the same branding. Same layout. A mirror image. And the city had accepted it. Before I could say anything, the notary said, "He's opening next month. Across town. With your logo. Your menu. And legally, he might win the branding rights unless you challenge it now." I turned slowly, my hands suddenly cold. And through the window, parked across the street, was his car. Waiting again.